if you're going to go out, you're going to go out to these rallies. Make sure that you're protecting yourself the best way that you can. Bring hand sanitizer. Avoid touching. Don't share drinks, but stay hydrated and wear a mask if you can. Even across the country, there's been physicians who have been out trying to make their voice heard on behalf of this. I was out yesterday, admittedly, wearing a mask amongst my colleagues wearing masks so that we could make sure that we were showing our support. And people are going to be upset with that one way or another, that even those of us preaching against going out and being near other people due to the safety issues, yes, we were going out because we want to show our support.
Joining us now to break down the intersection of these issues is Dr. Carole Lieberman, a three-time Emmy-honored media psychiatrist, best-selling author, and an expert witness in several high-profile cases. So, doctor, when we look at what's going on right now, I mean, it seems like we moved from one news cycle, that being coronavirus, into this next one, being the latest unrest taking place in cities across the world. Do you think that those two are tied in any way, maybe going from the lockdown orders to what we're seeing on the streets right now?
Yes, absolutely. They're tied in a number of ways. One is that we are, by having been isolated, having been made to stay in our homes, we're angry. We've developed a kind of what I call corona rage. It's like road rage where people have a short fuse and if somebody cuts them off, they explode. Well, we have corona rage when people are doing minor things that irritate, because we're so irritable from being locked down. When people do minor things, we explode. Now, then we had, of course, a major thing with the murder of George Floyd. And that was then set on this background of people being ready to explode. And then there are other, connections going the other way. There really is a danger in these people, protesters, rioters, looters, mixing together and spreading. I mean, some of them are wearing masks, but spreading coronavirus to each other, to their families, going home. And then also an additional thing is this is adding more stress to our lives. So when we watch this and hear about this, that stress works on our immune system, weakens it, and makes us more susceptible to coronavirus. So it's a spiral.
And I think you add up all the different things right there that does contribute to what we're seeing right now. I mean, there's economic hardship from a lot of people, acknowledging the fact that they haven't been able to go to work. Because of that, people don't have to go to work, meaning that those protests could take place later at night, throughout the week as well. Kids aren't going to schools as well. I mean, when you see a lot of these video type of footage coming out, you do see a lot of young people, which actually, when we talk about the intersection of what's going on right now in coronavirus, actually might be a silver lining in the sense that young people don't transmit the disease as much as older, more vulnerable populations. So when we see these crowds out there, you have to balance different things. I understand the big crowd that's out there, but also the fact that it is a younger crowd. Do you fear that there could be a second wave as a result of these demonstrations?
Oh, there's absolutely going to be a second wave because of what I was saying, them spreading it directly, but also even just the stress of making all of us who weren't there more susceptible to it. But, you mentioned the children, and yes, in some ways it's nice to have children out there peacefully protesting. But, there have been, I'm sure you've seen lots of news about kids who are looting and liquor stores and drug stores, getting drugs and copying their parents. That part of it is not good.
Right. No, I mean, you're exactly right to say that. In fact, I would say that most of the looting and rioting that we're seeing taking place is young kids who have nothing really to do with George Floyd. They're not out there for justice or anything like that. They're kind of capitalizing on the situation. But from a perspective of transmitting the disease, maybe it is a little bit better that they are younger in the sense that maybe they're not as more vulnerable. But you've been on several high-profile court cases. I mean, we talked about your latest Netflix appearances as well, the Trial by Media series. And so when I talk about the George Floyd case as well, there's two different autopsies, for example. There's a lot of different things coming in, such as the video itself. What really will go on at this case for people who aren't really familiar with how forensic evidence is used and just, I guess, evidence in general is used in court cases?
The autopsy is going to be, the two autopsies are going to be very important in this case because the first autopsy that came out from Minneapolis and that really helped to spark a lot of these riots because it didn't put as much emphasis. It didn't really directly say that it was mechanical asphyxia, which is what Dr. Michael Baden's autopsy report said, the private autopsy that the family got. The first one really was very vague. It said cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression. Subdual meaning the act of subduing. Now, needless to say, a lot of that was lost in translation, and what it came out as was it wasn't the cop didn't do it, or he didn't kill him. It wasn't asphyxia.
Right.
And in fact, the autopsy from Minneapolis brought in all of these other issues. Yes, he did have high blood pressure and he did have cardiovascular disease, and he did have on the toxicology screen, he had fentanyl, and he had marijuana, and he had methamphetamine. So that kind of, was blame the victim. It was kind of like, saying, oh, well, this was a bad guy, right? He had all these drugs in his system. So that fueled some of the riots, and it also didn't give an accurate picture. And then Dr. Michael Baden, who's, done lots of high profile trials and is very excellent in his work, he came out and said that it was mechanical asphyxia. And in addition, he made the point that the second cop who had his knee or was pushing down on George Floyd's back is also to blame, because that also contributed to the asphyxia. I mean, that contributed to his not being able to inhale the pressure on his back, and the pressure on his neck. That stopped the carotid artery from delivering oxygen in the blood to his brain. And also there were marks on his face which showed that his face was being pushed into the ground, and that made him have trouble breathing also. So the Michael Baden report was much more definitive in making this clear that it was a homicide and clear that it was asphyxiation, mechanical asphyxiation from these two policemen.
And of course, when we talk about this too, the conversation that we have in the media won't be what a jury is listening to. I mean, it's a lot more narrow. They're only allowed to bring in certain pieces of evidence. In fact, ideally for a prosecutor and a defender, you would like to see that they don't watch the news at all. You want to see exactly what's happening in a vacuum right there. And that's what they have to prove, that beyond a reasonable doubt, that individual committed now second-degree murder. His charges have been upped, meaning now they have to show that the intent was there to commit murder as well. So there's a lot of moving parts when we talk about this, and it's not exactly the same conversation that we're having in the media. But Dr. Carole, I really appreciate you coming on and breaking down those discrepancies, because it's very important in a case like this.